Hey, Ronnie Jr.
But talk about some of the highlights of the Complex experience. Like I said, I worked Complex on Fuse. It's a show that got reproduced to Fuse TV. Such a fun experience. But while I was in
Yeah.
that building in the New York City office, it was cool to connect with you in a way, seeing you just do so well at Complex. So I want to know, what are some of your just excited moments that you could look back on and say, this was a bit of a highlight of my hosting career?
I mean, I gotta say, working on that Fuse project with you was a huge highlight for my role at Complex, because I started as a weekend anchor. So I would just work a couple of days out of the week doing like green screen reads and reports on what was going on over the weekend. But I always wanted to get into like celebrity reporting, more like stuff like type of things, like pop culture. And Complex wasn't really, they weren't really in that mix, like the pop culture celebrity part. Like we weren't really doing red carpets. We were doing like interviews with musicians or, stylists or sneakerheads or whatever. And that was cool. But I was still pretty new at that time. So a lot of those opportunities were going to like the more experienced hosts, which of course should be the way. But the Fuse introduction, which was going to junkets like Mile 22 with Mark Wahlberg, of course there is the second act junket. Actually, that wasn't Fuse, that was Complex News. But I got
But
to
I
interview.
remember that. I
Yeah,
remember that because that was so Natasha is right there doing the second act press junket, and it's Natasha on one side, it's J Lo and Leah Remini.
yeah.
Um, I've done junkets. It's a bit nerve wracking. What did that feel like for you? Because I know you like J Lo, like I like J Lo.
Oh, I love JLo. And that is like she was my dream like interview. She was like on top of my list. So now I'm like, oh wow, I already got to do that. Like that's cool. I'd love to do it again, but it was extremely nerve wracking. I was very, very nervous. But it's kind of like once you're in the room, you just gotta go. Like
Mhm.
you have to like forget all the nerves. Sometimes you even have to forget like the prep that you have and just sort of be present. But yeah, JLo was a huge highlight. Mariah Carey was a huge highlight. I've probably never been more nervous for an interview than for Mariah Carey's interview. I was like terrified.
That makes sense though, because doesn't she have certain rules about lighting, and you probably can't look her in the
Yeah, she
eye.
does. That's
All
well,
respect to Mariah, but she is something different. Yeah.
what I love about Mariah, and I always knew that she had this reputation for being a diva. But when I was watching all of her interviews, trying to get my research done, I love that she just owns it, and she kind of like laughs about it too, but it's like, oh, I have to have my lighting, and it's just,
Yeah.
that's just who she is. Like she doesn't try and hide it. And I will say she was extremely sweet. Like she was so kind. There was a part in the interview where I asked something that her publicist was like not, like they were like, no, we're not going to talk about that today. And she like threw me a bone and was like, well, since you said this, it's like Mariah Carey does not have to throw me a bone. Like she could
Mhm.
very well just cross her arms and be like, next question. Like it's her 800th billionth like interview. So she did not have to do that. And I just remember being like, yo, Mariah, you are amazing.
I've never met J Lo or Mariah, but I think sometimes these people who have the tougher images, sometimes they're not actually that awful. It's just you got to think about it like this. This is not like you're having a conversation with the clerk at CVS. Like there's an entire multi-million business attached to these people. So sometimes there is a strictness that needs to be there for them to continue to catapult this successful career. It
Absolutely.
makes sense.